Hi, my name is Kieran Lyons. I'm the Director of Education Programs at To the Top Education Group. And today, in this video, I'm going to cover an important but often overlooked topic, which is simply how to email your teacher. So this guide is aimed primarily at middle school and especially high school students, but it will be useful for college students or people who are going into college right now when you're emailing your professors, or really a lot of the things that we'll be covering could apply to any professional or academic context. So if you just give me a moment, I will share my screen. So one note on this PowerPoint that you should be seeing on your screen here. In the interest of time, I will be talking a big picture issues related to how to email your teacher, mistakes, and best practices. However, there's a lot more detail on these actual slides, so I would encourage you to pause it and actually look at them for examples and more specific details about how you can actually write the best emails. You can also contact us, the information will be at the end, for the actual slideshow if you'd like to be able to look at it even more closely in your own time. This topic is especially important as the semester's coming up. I'm recording this in mid-July. Right now, it's up in the air whether a lot of school districts are going to be going to remote teaching because of the coronavirus pandemic, or whether they'll be going back to in-person, or whether there'll be some sort of combination. Either way, it's very likely that digital communication will be an important part of how you communicate with your teachers. So learning how to email in a professional way that conveys your message efficiently and gives you the best impression, or allows you to make the best impression on your teachers, is especially important. And especially if it's a teacher you don't know personally, it's possible that an email from you will actually be their very first impression they make of you. So before I get into that too much, I want to talk just a little bit about To the Top, our approach in general. We do one-on-one expert help with a lot of different subjects related to education. So everything from kind of educational advising like I'm doing now, but also tutoring, test prep, advanced planning for 8th grade on to prepare for college and a career beyond that. We also help basically everyone from an 8th grader who is looking very far ahead to college seniors who are looking to the job market, and people who are already out of or about to graduate from college who are looking at graduate school. We can help you in English and in Mandarin. Our upper leadership is all bilingual. And we've been working remotely, at least partly, with people in all over the world for several years. So we are very familiar with how to work remotely, unlike, I think, some other of our competitors. Okay, all that out of the way. If you have more questions about that, you can always get in touch with us. And if you're interested in something like English tutoring or college essay advising, you will probably want to get in touch with me because I will probably be the person to help you one-on-one. So before I talk about what is the best thing to do for your college, for contacting your teachers, I want to tell you what not to do. So on the screen are two different example emails. The one on the right, I'll read it out loud. Doesn't seem quite as bad as the other one. The other one I think has some obvious problems, but the one on the right, the subject is just help. And it says, "Dear teacher, I'm having trouble with my essay. Could you give me some tips?" It has an attachment. So the issue with the one on the right is a less extreme version of the issue with the one on the left, where it is essentially difficult for your teacher to interpret it. And it comes across as unprofessional and maybe even a little bit childish or overly casual, as though you're texting a family member. You want your subject line to be descriptive so they can find it in their inbox and know what kind of help you need before opening your email. And other aspects of it seem unprofessional or even childish, like saying "Dear Teacher," so the teacher's title and name. And there's no greeting or closing, so it comes across as possibly a little bit rude. The one on the other side is such a bad email, though you would be surprised by how often people get emails like this. I get them probably every week. Such a bad email that it might actually go to someone's spam folder and they never even see it. So what do you do? Here is a strong email. This is a more in-depth email than you might need to send every time, but it's a good, solid example with all the elements that you'd look for in a good email. I won't go over this now. I'll go over each component of it, but feel free to pause it and take a look and compare what this looks like compared to the other emails which I showed you a second ago. We will return to this after breaking down each component. The subject line. I think people overlook the subject line a lot, but it's a label for your email, kind of like these labels on the image here, that tells you what's going to be inside. If you are used to having an email inbox that is full of emails, and if you're in high school and middle school, maybe you don't get a lot, but your teacher gets a lot, and they don't have time to read them the moment they receive them and reply to them immediately or remember what they say. So it's really important to give it a helpful label. You want it to be longer than something like help and shorter than something like a complete sentence. So you want to have basically, consider what you want them to know, or what they want them to expect from the email before they even open it. There's some good examples here at the second bullet point, like question about MLA citations. Your teacher knows what this email is about, probably knows they have only a little bit of time to respond to you, and is basically less likely to annoy your teacher or get lost, and will give them the best opportunity to be really helpful to you. If in doubt, capitalize it like a title. Your teacher may or may not care, but the professional thing to do is usually to capitalize all the letters you would capitalize if it was a title of a paper. Another thing that's often overlooked is the greeting, or I should say, the correct way to greet your instructor, your teacher. Generally, you want to write "Dear" and then the title that they use in class, if you know it. It might be Ms. Albertson, it might be Dr. Lyons, and I have a list of common titles down there. One thing to especially pay attention to is for women, for female teachers, there are a lot of options. If someone has a doctorate, you'll always want to say doctor. But if they don't, generally you want to say Ms., M.S. period. If you're in doubt, use that for any woman who doesn't have an advanced degree that you know of. Miss with M-I-S-S is used for girls. You don't want to use it for an adult. And you might not even want to use it for young women because it can be a little bit demeaning. And Mrs. with an M-R-S, only somewhat married women use it, but not all married women use it. So only use it if you know the teacher uses it in class, has chosen to use it. If someone has a particular position, it's also appropriate to use that position as their title, like principal, dean, or coach. After that, and this is even more overlooked, I think, especially from in some other cultures, this is less required, but in the US, this is generally considered something that you should have in any initial email you send someone. The first thing you say should be something polite and personal, not overly personal, but something like, I hope you're staying dry with all these storms, or I hope you're doing well is maybe the minimum. It's best to do something unique and actually personal, but I hope you're doing well, it's usually fine. If the person receiving it doesn't know who you are, this is also a time for you to say who you are, which is another way of making a personal element to your email before you actually get onto your request or whatever the rest of it's going to be. If you're replying to a request or replying to an email, say your teacher wants you to email them an assignment or wants you to get in touch to schedule a meeting, maybe in Zoom or maybe in person, you should still explain that you are doing that. Instead of just sending an email back with an attached essay, you should say, I've attached my essay. It's also appropriate, usually in these emails, if you want to ask for more information, you should feel free to do that. But in general, more information is better than less information. If you have a request for a teacher or a question, which is probably the most common reason you'll email a teacher, at least that you'd email them first, the main thing is just to remember that they're a real person with feelings, obligations, a life outside school, and who actually has a lot of other stuff to do and other emails to respond to. So you should stop and ask yourself, basically, Are you being fair to your teacher? Are you making a request that is reasonable? Are you politely requesting something, or are you demanding something? In general, imagine that you're talking to your teacher face to face, and consider how polite you would want to be in that circumstance, and be just as polite in your email. And if you want to ask your teacher for something, you should generally phrase it as an actual question, and be prepared for them to say no if they're not able to fulfill your request. This is not a situation where someone works for you. Your teacher is someone who's deserving of respect, so you should be prepared to ask politely rather than demanding anything from them. This might seem obvious, but you would be surprised by how often people don't think about this, and don't forget to ask politely rather than rudely demanding something. And finally, after you have either acknowledged that you are responding to a request or asked your question or made your request, a brief closing is often really helpful. So it's something to essentially cushion your request with polite statements on either side. So before you ask someone for something, say, I hope you're doing well. And after you ask someone for something, you to thank them for considering your request, or at least say something nice. It's often considered kind of rude to just, for the majority of the content of a message, to be you asking for something. It does seem like it's a little bit much, maybe, to have to add all these sentences, but it doesn't actually have to end up with that much. It doesn't actually end up having to be very long. It can only be a few sentences long. In general, if your emails are just one sentence, it's probably not enough. You might actually be coming across as rude, even if you don't mean to. And then finally, at the end, your signature. Especially on a first email, it's safe to say thanks or thank you if you ask for something, or sincerely if you didn't, and then your full name. In my case, Kieran Lyons. If you're not sure that your teacher knows who you are, if you're not absolutely sure that they know your name, and when they see your name, they will know who is emailing them, it's reasonable to include more identifying information here if you haven't included it already, such as the class that you're in, your legal name, or your name from a different language if you don't always go by it, but they might have it on file, ID numbers, anything like that, to just make sure that they definitely know who you are. Just one tip is the way someone writes their name when they're messaging you is often a clue about how you should address them in the future. If you email someone and they respond to you with their full name, at the end, often that might mean that they expect you to address them using their title or their full name. If they respond with just their first name or a nickname, usually it is safe to use that name in the future when you're emailing them. If you need to attach something to a file, first of all, don't forget to attach it. Second of all, always explain what you have attached. You don't want to just attach something and not explain it and hope your teacher risks the click and decides to see what is in it. And in general, you want the file name, just like the subject line of the email, to describe what is in it. I've gotten emails with attachments that just say essay or assignment. And once I download that to my computer, I have to either rename it or risk not remembering what's in it. So just be polite and thoughtful and label the files that you're sending to somebody. And of course, always double check that it's the correct file. I have had a lot of circumstances in my experience as a instructor in college where someone has sent me an older version of an assignment, and I've graded it and gone all the way through. And before they realized, they sent me something that was a week older, and they risked, even though I was usually pretty nice about it, getting a C when their final draft might have gotten an A. So do double check. I mentioned earlier that a good email can actually be pretty short. Right here is an email that includes all of the elements that I mentioned without exceeding essentially 3 short sentences in the body. If you practice doing this, all these things will become second nature. It'll be really, really easy to write an email like this. They don't all have to be like this one. So we've returned to the one I started this section with, and I would suggest that you take a minute to pause it and look at this and see how all the parts come together into an essay that is informative, polite, and that a teacher would have no trouble responding to and probably be happy to respond to. In general, if you are at a grade level where there's communication from teachers or your school to your email, check your email at least once a day, probably more, and occasionally check your junk or spam folder. I remember when I first went to college, I didn't check my emails every day. I checked them every couple days, and that actually really hurt me and probably lowered my grades in some courses. To be professional, if you have a school email address, use it for all school-related communications. That is just a professional and smart thing to do. If you have to use a personal address for some reason, make sure that you have a professional and appropriate email address. And if you don't have one, you need to get one now. So don't use offensive or childish language. My example here is maybe a little extreme, but sugarbaby_drugdealer@yahoo.com isn't great. And you should use a well-known, usually US-based email service like Gmail or Outlook from Microsoft. And avoid using QQ addresses. They're hard to remember, and often teachers in the US aren't familiar with them. So you really want to make sure you have a Gmail, an Outlook, or a school assigned email address. The ideal one here is my real one, KieranLLyons@gmail.com. That's my full name, easy to remember, and someone receiving it will probably not be suspicious and will know who they got it from. Do take your email security seriously. Make sure you have a good password, and just do everything you can to avoid losing your email address to a hacker or something like that. And overall, think of emailing as sending a letter, not as sending an instant message. It's not a text, it's not a WeChat, it's not a WhatsApp. It is more like a letter than anything else. And if you received a blank letter with nothing on the outside, you might be suspicious. If you opened up a letter with something on the outside and there's nothing in there but a document, you might be confused. So make sure that there's never a blank subject line or body or just a mysterious attachment with no explanation. So if you have any questions about any of this stuff, or you're at all interested in getting a copy of the slideshow, or if you want to inquire about any of our other services, you can please contact us here. So by phone, email, you can also go to our website. We have a contact sheet where you can talk about, you can get in touch with us and let us know what your questions are, what services you might be interested in. And there are even some WeChat contacts for our executives. Thank you so much. I hope this has been really helpful. Don't forget to go back and look at this stuff in greater detail. And as always, whether you're a current client of ours or whether you're considering it, we would love to hear from you. I personally would love to get back and help you out with your own emails. So just let us know. And I hope you're staying safe and happy. And I hope if you're looking at this now, you're ready for a really productive and good and safe semester. Thank you very much.